probably heard it before. That famous promise in the Bible that says with enough faith, you can literally move a mountain. For a lot of people, it feels like a blank check for miracles. But what if we've been missing the point? What if the real meaning is actually way more radical? I mean, this verse from the Gospel of Mark, it sounds like a promise of almost unlimited power, right? It's been a massive source of hope for centuries. But to really get what's going on, we have to get granular. We've got to look at the tiny clues hidden inside the text itself, the little details that, once you see them, change absolutely everything. So the most common take on this, especially in what's known as the word faith movement, is that this is basically a blank check from God. Leaders like Gloria Copeland have explained it as a way for believers to use a God kind of faith to, and I'm quoting here, write their own ticket with God. In other words, you say it, you get it. But is it really that simple?
Okay, so here's our roadmap for cracking this case. First, we're going to look at why the popular view has some serious cracks in its foundation. Then, we'll play detective and follow the granular clues to figure out what this mountain actually is. And finally, we'll see what this all reveals about a totally different and maybe more challenging kind of faith.
As nice as that popular interpretation sounds, a whole lot of scholars and theologians point out some pretty major problems with it. And we're not just talking about a difference of opinion. These are fundamental issues that pop up when you look at the text really, really closely. So look at this. The popular reading basically turns faith into a tool for you to get what you want, almost like your words have this magic creative power. But the problem is, scholars say this view completely ignores the history, the literary structure, and even basic grammar. It kind of flips the whole relationship upside down, putting humans in charge of God. So if that reading is so shaky, what have we all been missing? All right, to solve this mystery, we have to put on our detective hats. We're going to get granular and look at the evidence that's been hiding in plain sight, these little details that are so easy to read past, but once you see them, they change the entire picture. So clue number 1 is just pure grammar. In the original Greek, Jesus doesn't say a mountain or any mountain. The language is super specific, to ore tuto, which means this mountain. He's pointing at one single particular mountain that everyone standing there with him would have immediately recognized. That's a huge clue. Now for our second clue, it's this really clever literary trick that the author, Mark, just loves to use. Scholars call it a Markan sandwich. He'll start a story, then interrupt it with a totally different story in the middle, and then finish the first story. The idea is that the two stories, the bread and the meat, are meant to explain each other. And that's exactly what happens here. The chapter begins with story A. Jesus curses a fig tree because it has no fruit. That's the first slice of bread. Then, boom, the story gets interrupted by the meat. Story B, where Jesus marches into the Jerusalem temple and causes this huge scene. Only after the temple scene is over does Mark finish the fig tree story. The two events are deliberately stitched together. So, what's with the fig tree? Was Jesus just hangry? Not at all. In the Old Testament, the fig tree was a common symbol for the nation of Israel. So by cursing a fruitless fig tree right before he confronts the temple, Jesus is making this powerful, symbolic point about the spiritually fruitless religious system he found there. And here's our third and final clue. When Jesus is clearing the temple, he's not just having a random tantrum. He's quoting scripture. He's quoting the prophet Jeremiah, who hundreds of years earlier stood in that exact spot and condemned a corrupt temple leadership for turning God's house into a den of robbers. This isn't just an outburst. It's a direct, historical echo of prophetic judgment. Okay, let's put it all together. We've got the specific grammar, this mountain, we've got the literary structure of the sandwich, and we've got the historical quote from Jeremiah. It's time to assemble the clues and finally solve the mystery of what this mountain really is. I mean, when you lay out the evidence like this, the case becomes overwhelming. The grammar points to a specific place, the story structure connects the mountain-moving promise directly to what happened in the temple, and that historical quote frames the whole thing as an act of judgment. All the clues are pointing in one single direction. This mountain that Jesus was talking about was the one he was either on or right next to, the Temple Mount itself. He wasn't talking about some random geological formation. He was talking about the physical, the political, and the spiritual center of the entire religious system that he believed had become corrupt and was no longer bearing fruit. Yeah, as the scholar N.T. Wright puts it, for anyone who was actually there, hearing those words, right after that dramatic event in the temple, there would have been zero doubt in their minds. This mountain was Mount Zion, the Temple Mount. The promise isn't about moving your personal obstacles. It's about the prophetic faith that a corrupt institution is headed for a fall.
Okay, so if this whole passage isn't a formula for getting what you want, what in the world is it trying to teach us about faith? Because this new historical context completely reframes the entire message.
What this passage is really about is a call to have faith, yes, but not faith in the power of our own positive thinking. It's a call to have faith that God will act decisively to judge and remove corrupt, man-made religious systems that get in the way of real justice and real worship. It's a faith that aligns itself with what God is already doing in the world.
So let's just recap the huge shift here. This is not a blank check for our personal wish list. It's a promise of vindication against systemic injustice. The faith isn't directed at our own gain, but at God's justice. The power isn't about acquiring things, it's about pronouncing judgment on broken systems. And get this incredibly powerful command to judge systems is immediately followed by a command to forgive the individuals who wronged you. You can't have one without the other.
And that brings this 2,000-year-old text crashing right into our world today. Because if the call is to have faith that unjust systems can and will be overturned, it forces us to ask a really tough question. What are the mountains of injustice, the corrupt systems in our own time, that need to be confronted and cast into the sea? That is a powerful idea to sit with.